Hey everybody, I am Sarthak Kaul and this is True Calling. Our guest today is Julian Saks. Julian Saks is the CEO of Finetune, which is a developer platform to test, evaluate, and fine tune AI agents. Julian hopes that Finetune will improve reasoning in a very complex multi agent system with 1,000 plus agents. I met Julian at UT Austin. He recently graduated from UT Austin, where he studied business economics and previously was president of UT's leading academic clubs. I hope you all enjoy. All right, Julian. So, funny that the first time we're talking live is the first time we're actually talking in person. We've just been chatting around. So, I'm so happy that you're actually joining for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Got out of the group chat, which is good. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to having good conversations, not only about myself but around the experience of what we've had, and really have that true calling experience.
That's awesome. And the crazy part is like one of my best friends, you just told me, is literally downstairs where you're at in SF right now. He lives in Toronto. So that's actually a very good segue into this conversation. It's like, yesterday I was talking to a couple of these undergrads who were just in SF for this past summer. They're like technical founders, and they were highly considering moving to SF after they graduate. So, you were in UT Austin. What sort of catalyzed for you to move to SF?
Yeah, if you're the question around is, okay, for myself personally, first of all, where are my clients? We're a dev tool, so we're now looking at builders building agents. You have to look at where's the best innovation, not at a high level, not at X or other big companies moving to Texas because it's better tax, cheaper land, things like that. You got to look at where the innovation is at the ground level. Go into coffee shops here, people are coding. Go into certain environments that really drive you to be better, and that's what SF provides. And it provides the opportunity to do partnerships, meet the people that are actually doing these amazing products, servicing people around the world. And you have to remember, Silicon Valley isn't a place on the map. It's this idea of working together, working in a high velocity environment, and shipping out of there. And SF seemed most crucial to pursue what I'm wanting to do personally, and all the endeavors that are involved in that.
So let's talk about that. What is, for someone that has never heard of the word agent, what does an agent mean? Like,
Yeah.
just to layman.
Yeah, for sure. So like you have a model that everyone knows. You've chatted to ChatGPT, you've chatted to all these ones from Anthropic and the likes. And the best way to say this, I'm actually taking from Andrew Ng. I'm a fan of him. I don't want to, be that I'm saying this on my behalf, but he put it in a really great way, is that you give a model a task, say, write me an 800-word essay on what true calling is and how it's affecting what population, what audience there is. That model will actually generate text from start to finish. Right now, you have O1 with better reasoning, but in the past, it will go from start to finish, write this whole essay. If I asked you as a human, could you now do that from start to finish without stopping, without ever pressing the backspace on your computer? You could never do that. So what an agent does, it has resources at its disposal, much like a human would. We have eyesight, maybe mine and yours isn't so good, but we have hearing and we have taste and things like that. And that's how we understand our environments and communicate and do tasks every day. We might not think about it, but we do. And an agent is much similar, is that it has resources, it has tools at its disposal, and these tools could call other agents to create multi-agent systems, but it can actually also hit different APIs. So you could actually do tasks, take actions. And the big thing is that an agent would say, much like a human, let me first research, let me then generate, then let me review the work that I've done. And it's all about these cycles. So you're seeing agents really take across different enterprises and across boards, you're seeing a lot of push in automating services and making them better.
So, I'm in the fintech space, and a lot of the people that we work with, I'm sort of at the intersection of Web3 and finance. So a lot of the people that we work with are traditional banks that
For
have
sure.
been there for ages and decades and centuries. One of the oldest institutions is like the banking institution, right? If why should someone in banking or someone in these highly like traditional industries care about agents? What would it do for them? What is the value there that you see?
Well, it depends who you ask within the banking sector. Are you asking the CEO of JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, or are you asking a first year graduate that just came on the trading floor? It's very dependent on who you ask. So let's take those two for example. One, you're looking at CEO of Goldman or along those lines. What you can actually do is start automating internal tasks. All the operations that run within this massive department. Try to figure out how to do it better. Have less people actually worrying about that. Actually building new services and products. So you're looking at very much automating that and figuring out how to do it at a higher efficiency, but also lower cost. And then you go to the question of like a first year, you just studied business, you're going to Goldman for your first year. It's about how do you do a lot more with the time? How do you now turn into more of a managerial role and have now a task being given to you and use agents to complete the layman task that you would have done that would have taken you 16 hours, but can now take you very less time, maybe an hour, 2 hours to do with the help of an agent and actually complete tasks quicker. What this looks like in secondary effects is that for big companies, they've become more efficient. They become more smaller but more efficient and more throughput.
You brought up this thing about secondary effects right now, and I think that's a fascinating way of thinking about it. Is what are the secondary effects of what you are building right now?
People will become managers. Doesn't matter if you're a consumer, it doesn't matter if you're big enterprises, you're going to have to learn how to be better managers. A lot of these tasks that we do, no matter like where you're at in life and what you're actually focusing on, you're going to have some sort of automation in your way. It's about how do we manage that. Many people have this concern that it like AI will like kill jobs and go take everyone. Yes, it will automate a lot of the entry level operations. Yes, it will, without a doubt. It's going to cut massive enterprises' costs and do that. But if you're adding true value to a enterprise, definitely not right now. You'll turn into more of a manager. You'll turn into how do I now manage these tools, manage these agents to do my job better, and focus on how do you enrich yourself with these tools. So definitely don't want people to have this mindset that you're gone. It's more about using this to be better and everyone leveling up.
So when you talk about managers, what are the skills that a manager needs to have to be a great manager?
Yeah, and leadership. This is like leadership in general is to be on top of your games, and know where loose ties are. But the biggest thing is managers need to be able to context switch. Really big important thing is that being able to go from one scenario to the next and that's completely different and dealing with different cases. So there's like I think PG Paul Graham was the person, you have like a coding schedule and a managing schedule. I know which side I'm on. I'm definitely on a managing schedule, even though I'm technical. But looking at how do you really understand within your mind, teach yourself how to keep track of a lot of things, being able to have a good sense of control over and know how to allocate your resources to certain things.
And what have you found out about context switching? Like, you're sort of building a startup right now, which requires constant context switching, especially as a founder. Like, what have you learned? And I know you have a very deep interest in neuroscience, like maybe even tying into like neuroscience. Like, what are the things that you're doing right now to get better at context switching?
Yeah, for sure. Like it's a lot just doing it. and actually like just being as anything is and practicing and having your failures, but that's general, that's normal. To have a failure, and people must embrace that. And I think specifically, I've spent some time recently learning how to memorize better. So like there's a tons of relationships that I've started to build up right now. It's like, how do I really put ties, create different, spins in my neural net, and different interactions based on who I've met or how to link things together. So I've been learning about that, but it's active just experience, and being able to do that.
You've talked in a previous podcast, I think with Michael Dagler, about earned experience, earning your experience. I don't know if you remember this conversation, but
Yeah,
it's like it, I was very curious about that part of it. Like, what what are the earned experiences you're having right now? You start off um, once you move to SF, like building memory, and then now you're sort of. I want to know more about the pivot from memory to Finetune, and what was the difference there, and what sort of came about that process? What are the insights you've had through
yeah.
that journey?
It was more of an iteration towards fine tune. I wouldn't say it was a pivot. It was kind of like, okay, we have something that's great, that's been open source, and the people that were working on it is pursuing further academics. So it was about how do I transition into a proper company, into not only stars and things like that. But I also think the transition was just having more earned insights, more earned experience. And what this is that obviously being in the game is very important, but you're learning things by tackling these hard issues. You're gaining these insights that you would only know not from reading a Medium post, but by actually building out an agent, working on these products. You understand what works better. So we have many things in the pipeline that we're going to not only contribute to, but pioneer different ways of doing things. But I wasn't a genius in this. I've had to learn this, and I'm exposed to this because I've worked within this environment and I understand it, where things are at, and analyze different market landscapes or different ways of people doing things. And that's what earned experience, earned insight is. It's that not by just being on the sidelines will you gain these experiences. And the more you do it, the more you're in the game, the more earned insights you actually get. You just see a clearer pathway, and you figure out which different ways you can go and what are the benefits of each. It's all about staying in the game.
Yeah, it reminds me of I was having a conversation last week with this guy called Riley Simpson, he's a chief of staff at Learn, which is like an ed tech focused VC, and we were sort of talking about uh, they've built a hall here for hosting a lot of very unique experiences for founders called Arena Hall, and the name Arena Hall came from the Man in the Arena speech by Ted Roosevelt, which is about you want to be the person in the arena doing things rather than being on the sidelines critiquing and criticizing people. Like, were you ever someone that was sort of outside of the arena? And how did you switch from being outside of the arena as a spectator to actually being part of the ecosystem, working on things? Like, what motivated you to actually be part of the arena?
So I guess like I wouldn't say I've been sidelined my whole life, but I would say like, okay, on an academia side, like I didn't get into
Hmm.
like some schools I didn't get into years ago, when I wasn't so into academia, and maybe I see why now. But I never got to the point where if anyone told me no, that doesn't mean that's one perspective. That's not going to be a global consensus on this. And then it was about just getting involved. In high school I wasn't as involved in extracurricular or organizations, university academic clubs, things like that, and it starts there. What I'm doing now could have never happened if I didn't get involved in research at UT Austin, if was leading all these clubs. And the biggest thing is that, one, just speak to people and say you want to do something. Like, it's as simple as that. But make sure that the thing that you're asking for, the thing that you want to add value to, you can actually add that value from past knowledge. So all these things are great. Earned insights is great. Earned experience is great. But if you don't have the knowledge in the beginning, you're going to go into all of these events and actually do it yourself a disservice by not adding value. So like the whole big thing is that just go out there and just go speak to your professor. If you're like a university student listening to this, go speak to your professor. Say you want to do this and why you want to do this and what the value is that they're going to get. And you start learning that everyone at different levels, be it Google or be it a small professor in some sort of smaller university, they're all the same. It's all just a different level of the same game. And the biggest thing you need to worry about is if I'm prepared for that, if I have the knowledge to actually pursue on that. And spend time in college. If you're a college student, reading as many papers as you can. Try figuring out different domains and figuring out what you like. It definitely gave me a clearer aspect. And if you find that you're doing different things, make sure there's some great link, because there might not be some direct benefit, but there'll be an indirect benefit later on in life. And I've seen that quite often.
Yeah, and you didn't start off in this AI space. That's the thing, right? Like you started off, well, at least from what I know at UT Austin, you were very involved in the blockchain side of things.
Yeah. It was just a great introduction into tech. I'm from South Africa originally, and you're not exposed to the amount of tech here and what's possible. And I think it was my first year we did a investment pitch, and I just signed up, and I was the only person there. I'm only person in my team. I did it solo and reversed other teams. I had won that, and I met a professor, and he really gave me a good viewpoint on what there is and what's out there. And it was just about getting involved. It was my sort of pathway into where I am now and how it worked out.
So let's talk a little bit about uh, you know transitioning to things that don't seem related but indirectly kind of are related. I recently was rereading this book called Range. I don't know if you read that book.
No, what
It's,
is it
it's this
about?
by this guy called David Epstein, and he sort of, all the Epsteins always sound controversial, but basically there was this whole thing around people are trying to move into a specialized field, and specialization is this thing that we've kind of like been drilling down into the culture, is that you should be specialized, you should find something specifically niche. And his whole research is based on the theory that if you are generalizing and if you're trying a bunch of different things, when you eventually find the thing that you want to go super deep into, you are actually better, you specialize even better by having a wide variety of interests and foundations, and you actually become a better specialist and a specialist.
Sure.
And his whole research is like looking at sports, looking at media, looking at all different examples from a bunch of different fields, and showing the same thing is like, the when you actually generalize into a bunch of different topics, you eventually become a specialist. What are your thoughts on that?
100%, like without a doubt. Like here's another analogy. There's like 10 different doors, and you don't really know the path that you want to go, the path that's going into each of these doors. If it was me and you asked me the question, which door do I want to walk down? It's like I first want to peep in each door and see what I like and see which pathway is the nicest, and then go down there, because the experience that I got from trying all 10 different doors might benefit me and aid me in going down this pathway for the 10th door. And it's just a nice, simple analogy. But it's all about, trying to grasp common similarities, connections amongst these different domains. So big thing is that try whatever experience you're doing, it helps you to progress to something further. And what I've seen relating to this book is that if you've had some sort of experiences in different domains, you first understand what you like and what you don't, but you also understand how to build connections within each of them, how to use something that you've learned to pursue that further, that really the domain you're going down. So for instance, agents need to be more reliable. Finetune's trying to provide better reasoning amongst multi-agent systems of 1,000 plus agents. They need better memory. And the only reason why I got interested in memory was because after at neuroscience, at Longhorn Neurotech, when I finished up there, the big interest that I had, the big question was, how do I form a memory? How do you form a memory? How does our curve of forgetting differ between each other? And at the same time, agents weren't reliable. They were really kicking up. And I sort of saw the same connections. And without just trying out neuroscience, building my own BCI for just the fun of it, I would have not had that earned interest and earned experience.
That's very interesting. So, as a question for you, I saw that you had, there's two questions there. One is about blockchain and AI. Like, how do you see them? A lot of people think of blockchain and AI as like completely different industries with like no overlap to each other. Um, what are your thoughts on how blockchain and AI can be complementary in some ways? Do you have any thoughts around that?
I've got friends working at like a Hyperbolic, Ionet, a Cash. A lot of these companies are doing distributed compute. So being able for you to now go on one marketplace and actually list your compute because you have a GPU that's sitting around and you can actually earn from that and it's fully permissionless. That's super, super interesting around that. I think you've got many players in that field, and then you've got something along the lines of like Fetch. So I see a lot of what's happening about these, maybe the auditing of the agents. How do you put that on chain? Because now companies need to know how agents have been changed, how agents have actually been operating, and what are the traces and the results, and making sure no one can now go change that and disrupt all the data on that. That's just one example that comes to mind, but definitely some very interesting takes on how distributed ledgers can integrate into AI and the likes of that.
Very interesting. So, you know, I saw that you were recently at AGI House
Hmm.
for a hackathon. For people that don't know about AGI, could you give some context on what AGI is and just like what have been your learnings from being around builders in that space?
AGI is not a thing. Like, people need to realize that. In my opinion, I'll just be frank. It's like, it's not that you're going to wake up one day and then there's AGI and it's like, oh my God, it's coming out of nowhere. If you ask, I'm in San Francisco right now, and Google has Waymos in production, like all over the city. If you had asked my parents like 60 years ago if they were self-driving cars, I think you're crazy, right? So it's this
Hmm.
natural progression. And that's kind of what we're focusing on, is that it's agents is such a key part of this, because if you have many agents within the system that can take upon different tasks, you've now generalized across that domain in terms of automation, in terms of intelligence. AGI comes in by pieces coming together: spatial intelligence, vision models, language-based improvements, even on a low resource language base. I have a nonprofit focusing on that. And this general sense of AGI is just the contributions of all that's led to now, starting from attention is all you need, to the release of ChatGPT, and all these improvements to small models. It's a collective effort from there. It's not a one-stop destination.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this knowledge that someone builds is through having, I mean, of course, researching on your own about this field, but also through conversations that you have with other people.
Yeah, definitely. Like here's a big thing that I learned really quickly is, like, if you read a paper and there's some cool person on there, go reach out to the person. It's like as simple as that. It's like you don't need to complicate it at all. And like they might respond, and there's good chances they'll respond, and they might not. And if they not, they probably don't care about their field enough, and trying to help
Do
others
you
out
do
there.
you think so? Do you think so? They don't really care about that field enough?
If you don't
What are the
respond,
things?
they don't respond.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, like, unless they're really busy and it doesn't provide value, like, the best thing they want, if I had to release a paper, is people ask me about it and people really engage with these concepts. That's the whole point of getting your product or your paper or your research project, anything out there. So I definitely think if people are spending that amount of time doing paper and research on it, they probably care about it.
So, you're naturally by being an SF and then also being part of like all these different hackathons, trying to get to the kinds of people that you want to be around, right? Like you want to be able to work with people that are interested in the same thing, are passionate about it, are probably very ambitious, just like yourself. To someone that has in their head no value to provide to any of these people, how do you reframe that for someone? Let's say he or she is a freshman in college and wants to work with a person that they really admire in SF. What is the sort of how can you navigate that conversation?
It's like super easy. Go see what the person's doing. Go say to yourself, what do I wish this person was providing me? Let's say I use a certain framework and I'm struggling in a certain way. I've got tons of friends that I've gotten into companies this way. Go build out what you want to see in that company. Go build literally. Go work on on your GitHub profile if you're an engineer or anything. Across the board. If you're doing PM, do new product designs for this company and go to find a way to get into the company and say, hey guys, I would have wished you guys had this and I built it out. Would you have a look at this? And if it's solid, if you're providing the value and what you said is actually worked, they'll most likely go integrate and if you have more down the line, you mostly get hired from them. So it's about not waiting for like, hey, go do this. It's about like taking the initiative and craft your future.
So why do you think people don't take initiative?
It's like there's two like it's this idea that that's not possible. That like you can't reach out to someone because they're that big or it just doesn't work that way or things like that. You have to have some sort of not rebel mentality. I don't want to say that, but a mentality that not everything's supposed to work in a certain way, and if I figure out a way to provide value, I don't have to go through that route. I'm not saying break the laws or anything or break how things are structured, but find ways to fill yourself in. And to your point, yes, I'm in SF. Yes, I'm meeting all these great guys, and yes, it's benefiting what I'm doing. But I would have not gotten accepted into all these things if I didn't do memory and open source that, and it didn't do so well, or I wasn't involved in clubs, and I didn't have this leadership mentality and the likes of that. So there's this common saying: people don't see the 10 years of hard work you've done. People never saw the hard work Sam put in. They just saw this crazy product and this now famous man. So it's all about grinding through those days, and this is so cliche, but like pursuing through those times where maybe you're not seen, and building up these skills and the knowledge set. So when you go into this room and you can meet these people, you're not doing yourself a disservice. You're actually providing value. You have good conversations. People actually get to like you. You could come to SF with no knowledge, and you actually probably hurting yourself.
So what is a conversation that you had recently that has reframed your perspective in some way, either directly into the way you're building your company, or either it's a conversation or something you read recently that has really reframed your perspective? Is there any example that stands out?
Yeah, like I think one like from obviously Elon's like from South Africa, close to where I've lived. Like he's shown what's possible. So I've read his book and everything. But one thing that stayed was that everything in life you shouldn't view that you're right, and that everything that doesn't go when you start you're right in something. Because then any failure is like, oh, is such a big effect on you. It's like you've gone down a different path. If you have the viewpoint that you're actually wrong about everything when you start something, you're everything's wrong, and you're just trying to make yourself less wrong, not more right, less wrong. Life will be so much better. Like everything that happens as a failure, you just see it as like, okay, I have to just work harder to make it more right. But it's not a drastic thing anymore. As well as when you do things right, you just that benefit of, okay, it's not such a side cliff. I'm working towards something, and I've seen as a way better mentality to look at life in general.
I mean, that requires a level of humility, I think, to be able to recognize that, right?
For sure.
Is th- is there some is there how do you the question I guess I'm asking is, how does one, I think a lot of these skills are learned, like they're very learnable skills, and we're sort of like we're creating agents to mimic our existence in some ways, right? To be able to learn these things. So how do you go about learning? Like what is your is there a way is there something you found about the way you learn that really stands out and it's made it easier for you to pick up things quickly?
Um, like being in those tough environments, like you learn really quickly. You know, being able to get on call quickly and you having to prepare for that, or you know, speaking with guys that you want to integrate that are working on cloud infra and things like that. You have to be in a position where you have to learn the things. You know, you're not being told. You're actually putting yourself in a position where I have to go learn about these matrices. I have to go learn about this deep concept because there's something to it. That's why I don't know. I'm a fan of university, but it's not like the best environment that I think students can learn in, because it's none of, you know, yes, you have your degree and the focus, especially undergrad, but there's not the specific sense of I'm going out and I'm looking at this because I'm interested in it. It's more about passive learning. Um, and the big thing that I looked at was like, okay, I never read a paper because I thought it would do me better, or, you know, it just happened that way, or I got given it. I read it because there's something that I need to go implement about it. It was a natural progression to that. So definitely, you know, just putting yourself in those situations made me learn a lot better.
What I hear there is that you need to have the learning you're trying to accomplish has to have an intention or means to an end. That is the core thing.
Yeah, or else what do you just go in your circles. You know, you're not building yourself up. And I urge this to anyone that's young. I'm 21 years old. I'm turning 22 in November. I'm young. So like, how do I envision myself? It's all about how big you can think. Like, what's this like broad vision going forward? And it's all about breaking down that broad vision come 10 years, 15 years, and breaking it down and asking yourself what's needed on that side. Always putting yourself into other people's shoes, because you're understanding how they view you. But, you know, building up these skills and figuring out how does one lead to the next. I had a good friend that said, should I do this? And I'm like, okay, well, how is it benefiting you what you're doing, or how does it benefit you going forward? And that's a big thing. You got to understand where you place yourself in society in general, and how you add more value, become more valued.
Like there's sort of two main perspectives that I see. Like there's have you heard of means goals versus end goals?
Possibly once or twice, but tell me about it.
Yeah, it's this whole thing, right? Like there's certain things that we're doing because they're a means to something else.
Yeah.
And there's certain things we're accomplishing so that we can do something else. And for a lot of like people that are building, a lot of the reasons is like, hey, I want to be able to be financially secure where I can actually pursue the things that I want to truly do. And for them, like the building a company that's sort of profitable, making them money is a way to like invest in the actual thing that they want to do. So the company is like a means to a different end. And then there's ends goals, which are like the things you're doing you're doing it for the sake of itself. And it's to simply get into your I play tennis because I just love tennis. There's no reason to do it other than that. Like I'm not getting any other benefit from playing tennis. So in that way, what is the means that Finetune is creating for what's the end goal for you there?
What's the end goal, or what's the means?
Yeah, like how is Finetune a means to a possible end? What is the end?
Listen, the end for Finetune is looking at how do we support very, very complex multi-agent systems. So you're looking at 1,000+ agents in an environment. Saw what Stanford did with Project Sid, and being able to allow for better reasoning in that sort of environment. Um, and that's what we're working towards. And you can see it that everything we do leading up to there is a means to an end to get us to that end goal. And so it's not only complete two different environments, it's one environment broken down. And that's really important, because then you break down smaller tasks into a means to an end, and then that's how you actually make progress. But end goal for me, like, I'm so young. I've got my whole life ahead of me looking at space, and looking at some really, really maybe more capital extensive projects on real world effects is maybe something I want to look down the later line. But for the time being, agents has been a great way for me to gain these resources, and something I'm super interested in, about something that I think is really going to be a big thing going forward, and want to definitely spend my time right now focusing on that.
Yeah, if you were an investor right now, and you had the capital to invest into something that's groundbreaking, that's something you're really passionate about, what would you put your money into?
Um, yeah, I think I like big projects. So it depends how much of a fund you have, and where your position is, and
You
what the
you
fund.
don't have to think about money. You're Musk. You're the next Musk, bro. You have
Maybe
yeah.
longevity is interesting. So like, how do I say this in a non-vile way? But people are working on full human transplants. So like actually figuring out ways to build up bodies, figuring out when you've passed away, how do you remove nerves? I'm trying to say this in a non exposure way, but people are working on that, and that's very interesting. I think space is super interesting. You know, it's something that's way above us. And an- answering the very much unknowns of what we have. So if I was a big investor, I'd be looking into that. Um, Very broad, but in those sort of domains. And then infrastructure within agents, I would. That's obviously why I'm building infrastructure. Um, and these are the sort of things that I would be personally interested in.
Do you think do you have a belief around what does everyone need to have a purpose? What are your thoughts on, you've probably seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how we are trying to kind of just keep on climbing that circle to reach this, or the pyramid to reach this self-actualization. And do you think that everyone needs to have a purpose? And what would a world look like? What would the purpose look like for people when agents are sort of taking over majority of the work that people are doing, at least in the short term?
Yeah, I think a lot of the tasks, like I said, at lower level are going to be automated, and I think people are going to find that they want to do more and upskill themselves, so they could actually do more and have this as a resource. But on a philosophical side, I know I don't think everyone has a different sense of what their purpose is, and that's totally fine. In SF, you have people. Just for example, you have people that are really focusing on the deepest tech and trying to do that, and but you also have people that are more on the hippie side, and more
Mm-hmm.
more more view life differently. So definitely not like a judge, and I'm definitely too young to be saying what people think, and how, if they're right or wrong, and things like that. Maybe one day I'll get there. But people have their own mission and should strive. But I think the biggest thing that I see in successful people is that whatever that drive is, you're obsessed with that. You're like, this is what I want to pursue. This is I'm doubling down on this. Be it you want to be a hippie, right? Go to the extreme. Go like live out a van and do all these
Mm-hmm.
festivals and be involved in the community. Or you want to build the coolest AI. So be involved in the community, really obsessing over whatever your problem is. Don't obsess over the solution, obsess over the problem. Because if you obsess over the solution, you don't figure out something else is better. And if what a fool is someone that is in a certain position that is too much of an ego to now pivot, or it's too much of an ego to now move into a better direction. In my opinion. And that's the biggest thing that I see. So no one has a true definition of this is my future. And everyone's definition alters, but it's about being committed to whatever that is.
Yeah, I love the level of humility you kind of have in terms of the way you approach, decision making. Almost, it seems like you're very, very non-judgmental towards the decision you have to make. And have you always tried being objective about this, or what are the subjective opinions you have? For example, like I want to know more about like that side of it, because I think people like can look at this conversation and go like, yeah, well, like this person's like speaking a lot of truths and saying it in a very neutral perspective, but I am curious to know, like, what are you opinionated about? Deeply opinionated about?
I'm opinionated that nothing extremely comes to mind, like initially, but I'm opinionated about, as I've said, that if whatever you don't, university in this, I'm from South Africa, so I immigrated to America. I'm opinionated about people believing like in themselves in some ways. So, like if I don't see that, I wouldn't say I'm against them, but it's not like who I want to hang myself around with.
Yeah.
And so I'm opinionated about that a bit. Like, we only have one life, and if you're not striving to do the best that you can, what are you doing? In my opinion. So I'm a bit opinionated about that. I'm not saying, anyone viewing this, should have a bigger perspective around or take that in a bad way. But, I'm very much for that. If you want to do anything, do fashion, do marketing, go build the coolest tech, but do it to the best of your ability if you said you're wanting to do it.
And tying off of that conversation and to sort of generally wrap this up, um, I asked this question to all the guests, and it's taken from Peter Thiel, is what is a belief that you hold to be true that most people disagree with?
Yeah, I know this one. um, the big thing that I've seen personally and around people is that to do something really, really well and to like be really committed to it, you have to have so much to lose. And I don't know if that's like the biggest conception that people understand. But you have to have something to lose. You have to have that deep sense of, if I don't do this, things aren't going to go well. It's very much like die or build, die or do scenario. If you want to do things quickly, if you want to do things meaningfully, you have to have something to lose.
What are you losing out on right now?
Oh, I'm open about this. I'm missing out, my formidable years with my parents. I've immigrated across, many people have, and like that's why frankly you see internationals do so well in tech. Like go look at all the top CEOs. Most of them are Indian. It's just true. It's because you're not spending time with them, and they're far away, and you're building up this craft, this vision, and if you don't, you could be spending time with them. You could be spending time with your childhood friends, living a good life. So it's about, what do I have to lose? I have that to lose, my years, you don't get back time. So, that's in some ways, amongst other things, amongst my own, visions and things, drives me. And, you need to have that core driving aspect as well. And that's cause thing to lose. And I'm open about that.
I have a theory on why so many CEOs are Indian. Because I mean, they could be from other countries. Why are so many of them Indian? Like, is the question, right?
Better life in America. And like you figure out, like I can say this from South Africa, it's like you see, and I don't mean this to against Americans, because most Americans, that's all the scale. But you actually like view what's possible. You like understand the scale and the opportunities that you can actually do given a lot of work and a lot of time. It's very visible. It's very contrasting to what you had in India, be it Mumbai, be it Bangalore, be it Chennai, or all the way back in South Africa. It's just a complete different sense of what's available. And just go look at the consumer power in America. It's crazy. India as well is a lot, but what you can do here, you very much have that vision of this is possible in some ways. This idea of the American dream is only possible if you really, it's cliche, but like if you really, work at it and you have that strong vision and you continue at it, but it's possible. Yeah.
I'm curious to know a little bit about South Africa, honestly. Like, I don't know much about South Africa. What have you seen as what is sort of the culture in South Africa, right, when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship?
Listen, on a relative, like it has a good, some set of hubs, be it that I only grew up in high school there. So it's not like I had that sort of experience as I am now there. So other people will be better way to answer the what startup life there, or what's the community like, what's the culture. I can't speak upon that in a good sense. But what I can say is that South Africa's got a great national unity. Like America's very divided. Some people say you're first liberal, democratic or Republican, then you're American, then whatever religion you have in America. In South Africa, it's like you being South African comes first before race, and they've had such struggles and issues. In the past, is that there's this unity. Go watch when the Springboks, the rugby team, win a game. It unites the whole country and it provides them hope. So there's been some interesting history in South Africa, but this national unity is something that you don't get in many places.
And I never saw that, truly in the US, but being in a college like UT Austin has shown me a little bit of that spirit. And I think there's like pockets of spirits in the US, right? Like it's these pockets of like concentration on identities. And right now UT Austin's like turned number one, like in terms of football, they're like the number one team. I don't know anything about football, but all I hear is this because I'm just here. And that just like shows me the amount of spirit that colleges can kind of create. And on a tangential note there, how can colleges better work? And I think you can use Stanford as an example there, but how can colleges better work to create an ecosystem where founders and people that want to actually make an impact on the world can create that impact? What are your
I
thoughts on
think
that?
I think it's first has to come from the students. Like there needs to be, you got to understand, a university is a business itself. It's got to know when to allocate resources and where the demands are and how to use their funding and things like that. So it's got to come from the students. Like Longhorn Neurotech is a great example of this. Last year, when I donated my BCI, brain computer interface, to them to use, it was like 6 people. Now you're having like teams of like 20 each and like around 60 people. And now there's a need for university to come in. So I think demand has to come from students, and there has to be introductions to that to make sure students are exposed to these new things. But then I think about providing the resources to connect students to industry leaders and to actually like put them in their perspective, because you can be very abstracted to what you want to build being a student and not knowing how real industries actually work. So providing that sort of connection, because then the students actually building towards that industry, and actually building products that could service that industry. So I think that's really important, and just creating an environment, but it does come from the students. And how university can help that is admit students that have more of a experience around that, and universities do, because they want to cultivate that. And then it's all about what the students do, and then it's about how the universities provide resources and value to those students.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And this sort of like, comes to the last question on I'm a big proponent of mentorship in some ways. And this whole idea of I think the idea around mentorship is a little bit flawed in the way that people view it. A lot of times we think of mentors, we think of these sages that are just like 20 years ahead of us in life, and like we can like ask them any question, and they'll just like conjure up an answer for you right there. And I think I believe a lot more, especially with the speed at which we're going in the world right now, in this concept of near peer mentorship, which is this thing like a Julian that is 21 years old and is building something will probably find it to be contextually much relevant to meet a Matt who is 23 years old and who's also just moved to SF, but also is building a company and is like 1 to 3 years ahead of them in that journey. And they can provide you a much closer context on what it is the next step that you might need to go to that next level. So what are your thoughts around mentorship? How has that influenced or helped you, impacted you in any way?
Yeah, well, in terms of, there's a few questions there. In terms of, I'll just say quickly, impactful. This is, I would have not learned anything if it wasn't for Professor Sriram Vishwanath. And if he's watching this, hey, he was great, and he exposed me to a lot, as did many other mentors, and not only him, but definitely one that comes to mind. In terms of setting up mentors, you have to really connect them really well, in the sense, one, they can get along well in an informal manner. I think that's really important. Get to know the person. It's not all transactional, which I think programs at universities make it transactional, because there's this power balance between students, especially undergrads, and then a professor or a assistant professor, something like that. So I think it's important to connect people that, there's some sort of informality as well. and can find interest outside of just work and what they're actually there for. As well as I think setting it up, as you said, in the right way to that whoever the mentor is has done what the mentee is trying to do and can provide, a way so that the mentee's not going in zigzags, it's going in a straight line towards its actual, what it actually means to an end, what the mentee wants to get done. And it's the same way if you're starting up a company, you're bringing on angels at these early stages. Make sure these angels have done what you've done, that you want to do, and they can provide that clear guidance. So the two aspects of that, obviously, some sort of informal connection that they could get, but also making sure that the mentor has done what the mentee has done, wants to do.
Dude, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I know we just kind of are done with our time here, but any last like key takeaways for like a Julian who's like 18, 19 and considering just they have big ambitions but don't know how to do it. Any last takeaways for them?
Get involved. That's pretty much it. Get involved, learn as much as you can, explore different interests, and know that if there's not a direct benefit from something, there will be down later on in line. And just stay in the game. Build up your resources, and remember, like, you're 18, 19. I'm 21, 2022. I think I'm still so young. Like, you're so young, and try really build up these resources. So when you're at an age of mine, you can now have proper discussions around a company and lines that, but you've got a great project. If you're technical, you've got a great repository, you GitHub profile, and you've worked on some great stuff, and you've done it because of you're just interested. That's the key. Just be interested, and things will come along and be clearer down the line.
Yeah, it's like starting off with things like as projects rather than these big companies that people see, I think is a great way to start. It's like small projects that lead to these bigger outcomes.
But on that note, you need to have the big vision to work towards that. That's also a skill, is to be able to have a big vision and break that vision down into actionable steps. So yes, work on it as a project, but don't just do projects for the sake of it. Have a project because there's an intention behind it.
Yeah.
Something I'd advise as well. But thank you for having me on. It was awesome. Great discussions.
Thank you, man, Julian. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.